So welcome everyone. So today we're going to share a little bit about the Life Recreation Remedies project, some of the work that's been going on looking at seagrass habitat in particular, and with a focus on sustainable anchoring and mooring and best practices. So today presenting, you've got myself. I'm Caitlin Napleton from Natural England. I'm a marine lead advisor in the Thames Solent team and the Solent site lead for the Remedies project. So doing a lot of kind of the local work for the Solent region, but I'm also going to provide a little bit of input from some of our other sites with the Remedies project too. You've got Tim Ferrero joining us as well, who's a senior specialist in marine conservation at the Hampshire and Isle of Wight Wildlife Trust. Tim is everything seagrass, our go-to, so he's going to be sharing some of that amazing knowledge with us. And you've also got Kate Fortnam from the RYA in Green Blue, the Sustainability Campaigns Manager. Kate is the one kind of putting all of this together, organising this evening in the webinar. You may have seen her at previous different engagement events on Green Blue stands and boat shows. And she'll be sharing some bit more about the focus with sustainable anchoring and mooring. So this is just what we're going to go through today. We've got a little bit of an introduction to the Remedies project, what we are, who we are, etc. Importance of seabed habitats, particularly seagrass, and what those seabed habitats are, and then a real focus on how can the boating community help protect these seabed habitats, finishing up with some of the project activities that we've had going on and some stuff we've got coming up, and we'll close up with a Q&A. And like mentioned, we definitely encourage everyone to get involved in the Q&A portion. So, Life Recreation Remedies. Remedies. Oh,
sorry, that's Kate just telling me that her Teams keeps crashing, but she's going to try and come on using her phone, and that's my noisy phone notification for the hard of hearing.
No worries.
I'll switch it off.
No worries. Well, that's good news. Hopefully Kate will be able to join in a moment then. But yeah, so Remedies is an acronym, and it stands for Reducing and Mitigating Erosion and Disturbance Impacts Affecting the Seabed, which is a bit of a mouthful, so we usually stick with Remedies. But you can find a lot of information about our project at the website saveourseabed.co.uk or on social media using the hashtag SaveOurSeabed. So Life Recreation Remedies is taking place in 5 special areas of conservation around the kind of south coast and southeast of England. And that's the Isles of Scilly, Fallon Halford, Plymouth Sound End Estuaries, Solent Maritime, and the Essex Estuaries. And these sites were chosen because they've all got seagrass habitats and sensitive seabed habitats that are currently in unfavourable condition. And they also have quite a lot of recreational activity occurring in them. Often you get these kind of occurring in the same places. Both love a bit of a sheltered bay, for example. So those 5 sites were picked to try and introduce some different measures, look and work with the communities and do different engagements and activities. It's a 5-year project, so we are actually in our final year now, in the kind of final stretch to get everything sorted and finished up. And the overall aim of the project is to restore and protect seabed habitats. And one way we're doing that is focus on that recreational activity and looking at how we can minimise the disturbance impacts from that. So the project is a partnership with some amazing organisations. It's EU Life funded. So that's just those logos at the top. It's led by Natural England, but we partner with RYA, Green Blue, Marine Conservation Society, Ocean Conservation Trust, Plymouth City Council, and the Tamar Estuaries Consultative Forum. We also work with the Wildlife Trust and a few of those different sites, including the Hampshire and Isle of Wight Wildlife Trust. So each of those partners brings a different kind of knowledge and niche to the programme, and the Green Blue RYA bring that real kind of boating and recreational water sport activity insight and knowledge to the programme. So why would we look at restoring and protecting seabed habitats? As mentioned, those sites all have unfavourable condition at the moment. So this is assessed through kind of Natural England and the management of those protected sites. And all of those beds in unfavourable condition are protected as well. They're designated features. We've seen a significant long-term reduction in seagrass extent and quality, and this has been going on for a really long time. So research has shown that since 1936, we've lost at least 44% of the UK seagrass beds, which is quite a staggering amount, and that is just the minimum that we know we've lost. Um, and there's lots of different pressures that Tim will go through later on, but one of them is the interaction from recreational activities that's been contributing to the loss of these seabed habitats. And this is just a little video of a diver doing some surveying in a seagrass bed. Hopefully you can hear that noise. I don't know if you will be able to, but this is showing not fully dense seagrass bed. There's a little bit of sparsity in there, but you can see some of the different creatures like the snakelock anemones that grow on the seagrass there. You can see lots of varying heights and things. So all of that is recorded when we survey the extent and quality of those seagrass beds. So I'm going to hand over to Tim now for what is seagrass and why is it important? Just shout slide when you want the next one, Tim.
Great, thanks, Kate. So just interesting, looking at this slide, you might see some interesting black blotches on these seagrass leaves, and that looks suspiciously like the seagrass wasting disease, which 100 years ago began the sort of calamity for our seagrass meadows, when it's believed that over the whole North Atlantic, over 95% of our seagrass meadows were wiped out. But before we go any further, slide, we really need to know what seagrass is. And the clue's all there in the name, seagrass. Seagrasses are the only marine flowering plants. They're not algae. They're actually closely related to the lilies and ginger, for example. So they're proper flowering plants. And as you can see on the left, these plants complete their entire life cycle underwater. So starting off with a little seagrass sapling, growing up into adults, and importantly, developing a mat of roots down in the sediment, the rhizome mat. And that's really the most vulnerable part of a seagrass meadow. If that gets damaged, then the meadow's really in trouble. Those plants, as they grow, of course, they start to flower. And in the middle shot, you can actually see some seagrass flowers in what they call a spathe, which is the flowering head of a seagrass plant. In due course, those produce seeds, which are negatively buoyant, sink to the seabed, and in theory, the whole process starts again. Next slide. So we have about 70 species of seagrass worldwide, 4 in the UK. We're mainly talking about 2 of them, really, 2 eelgrasses, Zostra marina and Nanozostra knoltii. And they change the habitat. They turn the seabed into a meadow environment, and that is brilliant as a habitat for marine life. So there are numerous species that live in and rely on seagrass. We can see seahorses, 2 species in the UK, both protected, both use seagrass, and one is absolutely reliant on seagrass. Stalk jellyfish, tiny, beautiful little and very rare members of the jellyfish family. Things like sea hares, top right, animals which use the seagrass for shelter and as foraging space, as do so many others like our pipefish, a close relative to the seahorse, and our cuttlefish, for example, migrating in from the deep channel, 60 to 100 kilometres offshore every spring, in fact, just about now, and they lay their eggs in the seagrass meadows. Then they die. Cuttlefish only live for 2 years, a very vulnerable stock, and they rely on seagrass meadows and other similar habitats to provide them the support for their reproductive cycle. And there's a place there as well. 9 out of the top 10 fish that we like to eat rely on seagrass at some point in their life cycle. So, slide, vitally important for biodiversity, but also performing some other really important, what we call ecosystem functions. They're photosynthetic, so of course they take in carbon dioxide from the water, they store it in their leaves and roots, and that's a bit of a carbon store, but what's really important is that they slow down the water that flows through seagrass meadows. That causes lots of particles to settle. We've gone off a little bit early. and that is forms, those particles are loaded with carbon and form a really important carbon store. Up to 40 times better than the rainforest, says David Attenborough. That's one tropical example. But even here in Northern Europe, some seagrass meadows can be 6 or 7 times as good. If you're even 1 times as good as a tropical rainforest, you really are providing an important function. They also shelter our coasts from wave action. So that's a natural sea defense that we don't have to pay for. They fix nitrogen, helping to clean up our polluted and eutrophied, over fertilized waters. And of course, there's commercial fishing that they support. Next slide. There's lots of really pragmatic, important reasons why seagrass is so important, but another one that overlooks is they're just fantastic places. In my research days, I travelled the world, saw lots of blue planet, there's seagrass seeds, blue planet environments. This is snorkeling in about 70 centimetres of water off the Isle of Wight. And on a sunny day, I can tell you, it's just one of the most stunning wildlife experiences that I've had in my 35-year career or so as a marine biologist. So here we are drifting through the seagrass meadows here at Seaview, collecting the seed. You can see them there, and just surrounded by wildlife. A fantastic little green shore crab there. Some adjacent seagrass. There's a stalk jellyfish, beautiful, delicate species, unlike this large lump of a marine biologist, but a fantastic dense assemblage, a lovely candy striped flatworm there, the snake-clock's anemone with its photosynthetic tentacles, and a pipefish, again close relative of the seals. You can see how shallow we are. You can even see the houses in the background. A couple of pipefish courting dance there, and just, you know, a stunning vista. All it's missing is a manatee really, but fantastic world-class environment. Next slide. But this is an environment which is under threat. And what are the main threats? Next slide. Obviously, we have, we have the big ones we can't avoid, like climate change, sea level rise, changing the sea temperature, which is a problem for most biology, plant and animal, causing coastal squeeze as the sea level rises and hits our hard coastal defences. A lot of these coastal habitats have nowhere to go. Bottom left, we can see, sorry, there's a slide gone. Bottom left, we can see over fertilization from fertilizer running off the land and from sewage causing blooms of green algae. On the right at the top, we can see bait diggers, a direct impact digging through seagrass meadows. There's a dog there to indicate people just walking on beaches can be a problem, trampling. And in the middle, the one that really concerns us in terms of boaters, we have damage through anchoring and mooring, physically disturbing and damaging the seagrass. Next slide. And so that is an issue that the Remedies Project has looked at. On the left, you can see the glorious seagrass meadow at Osborne Bay on the Isle of Wight. And on the right, when the tide's in, then boaters love to visit this location, drop anchor, stop for lunch, and that does cause a problem interaction. Next slide. So both moorings and anchorages are similar to a certain extent. An anchor, as the chain drags over the seabed, can physically tear up leaves. But really, it's this abrasion of a chain riser from your anchor or from a mooring with wind and tide as you move round and round an anchor or a mooring, it can wear a hole in the seagrass meadow. Next slide. Some examples there here from Porthdinllaen, I think, up in Wales. This is a mooring scar in the intertidal, and you can very clearly see the impact that it's had, a very clear hole. And looking down from some aerial footage from St Mary's on the Isle of Scilly in this bay, the dark is a seagrass meadow. There's a popular mooring field over it, and there you can see the circular holes that have been worn in the seagrass by the anchor and mooring chains. Next slide. And this video, it kind of really illustrates that. Obviously, an anchor, or this is a mooring in Osborne Bay on the Isle of Wight. We have a large concrete block and then a chain riser which lies on the seabed before rising up to the buoy. And this diver is actually going to swim away from the mooring block. There's the chain there over the right. It's going to follow the chain, and you can see that we're looking at sort of a fairly bare seabed, just sand, a few pebbles, some shells, the odd scrap of seaweed. Now, you do see seabeds like this, but the important thing is that this is a hole, and just appearing now is what really should be there. That's what would be there if it wasn't for the mooring, which is our fantastic, luscious, biodiverse, ecosystem providing seagrass meadow. So that's the issue, and Kate maybe is going to talk a little bit about how the boating community can actually help protect the seabed from those sorts of impacts.
Hi, yeah, I'm now with you. Are we getting any feedback at all?
Hey, pretty good.
Good, okay. So I'm going to tell you a little bit more about how we can protect the seabed from a boating community. Next slide. So with regards to sustainable anchoring and mooring, the Our Way and the Green Blue have been doing lots of awareness work around this and trying to provide guidance and support for the boating community to enable them to adopt best practice. Next slide. Can you still hear me now?
Yep, we can hear you.
So as part of the project, we've developed this guide, which you can download here using the QR code. It's also available on the Green Blue website, so you can go and download it there as well, and it's available in hard copy if you wish us to post it out instead. This essentially gathers all the information on the Remedies project, provides you with anchoring top tips, as well as an introduction to advanced mooring systems. But don't worry, I'm going to go into a bit more detail about those now.
Oh, I think you've gone on mute, Kate.
We back?
Yes, all good.
So in the early days when we were doing outreach work as part of the project, we would go and deliver talks at sailing clubs, at boating events, and a lot of boaters didn't realise that we actually had seagrass in UK waters. And once we explained how important they were, boaters wanted to do what they could to protect it. But the first thing that they informed us of was, well, where is the seagrass? How can we locate it? Then make an educated decision to anchor outside of the seagrass areas. So these are the types of things that we've been working on to support you as boat users. So first of all, Natural England or DEFRA had quite an academic GIS map layer online, which would require you to have a bit of knowledge to be able to locate the seagrass. So working with Natural England, we managed to get them to develop a link straight to the seagrass areas on an online map. And you can see a little outtake of that in the bottom left-hand corner here on the slide. The other thing that we try to do is also just get maps of the areas and try to use nautical maps, which is helpful for boat users. They can be found on the Remedies project, but also on the Green Blue website, and therefore the 5 sites that the project's focusing on. If you want to explore where seagrass is around the rest of the UK and in England, then I recommend going to the Natural England online tool, which I will give you a QR code coming up next, so get your cameras ready. The other things we've been looking at is trying to do signage at marinas and posters for clubs to display. And in the right-hand corner here, you can see one of those signs. At the moment down in Plymouth, we have 6 marinas that have 2 of these signs at each location. And this is enabling boaters to look at the charts, identify where seagrass area is before heading out onto the water. So then a decision can be made about maybe choosing an anchorage spot away from the seagrass or making sure to anchor outside of it. because this is where the nautical charts are really helpful, because they give us as boaters the contour lines. And if we know seagrass, for example, exists within a 5-metre contour line, if we're visiting a bay, then we can make sure that we deploy our anchor outside of it. The other things that have been really, really helpful is we've been setting up voluntary no anchor zones. And this is helping to put marker buoys on the surface of the water at the boundary of where most of the seagrass is contained. And the image here, you can see an example that's been used for a marker buoy at the voluntary no anchor zone down at Jennycliff Bay in Plymouth. And we have a new voluntary no anchor zone at Osborne Bay. The other thing we've been doing at the Our Way has been working with the electronic chart providers, because it's important that boat users can use the technology they're already using to determine where they want to anchor. At the moment, that's an ongoing process, and we're looking to make sure that there's consistency across all the different providers in terms of symbology. So the colours used for seagrass areas on your charts, and the locations of advanced mooring systems that are visitor moorings for yourselves. Next slide. So this is the online tool. So if you want to find out where seagrass is located anywhere in England, then you can scan the QR code here, and that will take you to an online map. Otherwise, you can type into Google Natural England National Seagrass Layer, and it will bring up an ArcGIS map just like this one. And it's a bit like Google Maps, where you can move around the map, zoom in and out and get more detail. And then once you're looking at where the seagrass area is, you can look at your nautical charts and make a comparison. What we're finding, though, predominantly is most of the seagrass in our sites, excluding the Isles of Scilly, is the seagrass is existing within the 5-metre contour line. So as a rule of thumb for you as boaters, is if you're not sure if seagrass is down underneath the water, or you know it's in the area, try and anchor outside of the 5-metre contour line. But for absolute accuracy, it's good to use these tools. Next slide. So another way that's helping us as boat users still be able to visit these beautiful coves and bays that are nice and sheltered for our vessels, but also brilliant habitats for, or locations for, seagrass and other sensitive habitats as well, is trying not to anchor at all and finding ways that maybe we can still go in there using what we call advanced mooring systems. Next slide. So I'm going to play you a video that the project's developed to help try and explain the difference between a traditional swing mooring, where we have an anchor on the bottom of the seabed and a chain attached, which goes up to the mooring buoy, compared to what an advanced eco mooring system looks like. Kate, if you'd like to press. Not sure if there's a volume button.
Can you hear it? Sorry.
No, I can't.
Cool.
We have subtitles, so. So I'll explain through. So what you're seeing here is that traditional swing mooring, when the chain lays out onto the seabed and then causes abrasion of that seagrass. And then as the tide drops, more chain is laid out on the bottom. And this is the issue with the design of our traditional swing moorings, is the chain length is for the maximum height of water. And unfortunately, when the tide then drops, all of that chain lays out across the seabed. So what can we do in terms of technology to make sure that chain is lifted off? So what we're seeing here, first of all, is a design called a Sterling mooring, where floater buoys are attached to the chain. And then to replace the large anchor block, a helical screw is screwed into the seabed, allowing more space around that for seagrass to grow. AMS are used all around the world. It's not a new technology, but we're trialling them in different sites within the Remedies project. Next slide. Went faster than usual. Okay, so what we can see here is that diagram of a Stirling mooring. We originally installed those down in Corsan Bay in Plymouth, and the floats are designed to lift that chain off the seabed. So this is probably one of the less expensive advanced eco mooring options. What I love about this video here is it shows you the floating buoys on the chain, and you can see patches where the vegetation's not growing. And that's exactly what's happening with the chains rubbing on the seabed. And the chains here are abrading those buoys, as you can see. So this is a video taken of the advanced mooring systems which are installed down in Corsan Bay in Plymouth. Next slide. So the other version, instead of the floats, is using an elastic riser. So replacing the chain completely. The elastic riser obviously is elasticated and stretches and helps to take out the tension from the bow of the vessel when it's being pulled in the wind and tide. So this is a way of replacing the chain, which usually creates a dampening effect to help prevent that pressure on the bow of our vessels. So these are great designs and technology, and there's a few flex risers actually available out there. The one you can see on the right hand side here is provided by a company, so we're just talking about the black part of it. It's provided by Hazelet Marine, and these are the moorings that are installed in Studland Bay. And 2 weeks ago, up to 87 of these advanced mooring systems have successfully been installed in Studland Bay. So that's a real celebration. Although Studland Bay isn't in the Remedies Project's 5 sites, the RWA has been working closely in this particular area, and we're learning from each other and from different projects working on seagrass across the UK. The other makes are Seaflex and SafeMoor. And ABC anchors provide the helical screw here, which is actually used in the foundations of buildings to stabilise them. So it's been transferred over into the marine sector. Next slide. So these are just quick images. This is the SafeMoor, slightly smaller flex riser. These are being used in Wales. And then on the right hand side, we have a Seaflex. This looks like one of their more robust versions, because they use them for securing floating houses and hotels as well around the world. And I think this is one of the more heavy duty ones. It would be a smaller one for our vessels. Next slide. So what is the best practice that we need to adopt as boaters? The first thing is, if we're choosing an anchorage, we need to identify, is there seagrass there? So go and use the tools that I shared with you. They're also available on the Save Our Seabed website, and also on the Green Blue website, where we have an advice page on anchoring and mooring with care. So you can find the Natural England maps, but also the maps for Wales as well. The next thing is, once you know where those areas are, try to anchor or moor outside of the seagrass areas. If you can't, try and moor to an advanced mooring system if there's any installed in those locations that you're visiting. So find out, you can usually contact your harbour authority, or you can research online for those. The next thing is, if there isn't any advanced mooring systems available or left to moor onto, then use a traditional swing mooring. It's already been installed and it's already probably created a bit of a scarring patch there. It's better than anchoring in a fresh new area. Finally, if you have no idea what's underneath the hull of your vessel and there's no moorings available and you need to go into an area that may potentially have seagrass in, then it's how can we anchor in a more sustainable way? So the first thing is, make sure that you use the correct anchor for sand and that the anchor doesn't drag through the vegetation. So good deployment there. The next thing is, keep the chain to an absolute minimum. Any additional length of chain can cause a lot more abrasion. And then finally, as the tide changes, rises and falls, bring in the chain and let out the chain as you need to. Next slide. So this is a diagram just to really emphasize that small changes we make as boaters in terms of the chain length that we're using when we are anchoring have a huge difference. So, for example, if we had 6 meters of chain laying on the seabed, as the diagram is showing coming out in the purple line from the anchor point, it has the potential, if it did a full pivot around that anchor point, to abrade 113 meters squared of the seabed. Now, let's say sometimes when we're on board, we might deploy an extra 2 meters just to be extra safe, to make sure our vessel's secure. So let's go to 8 meters. I've added 2 meters on, that's lying on the seabed. Suddenly it goes up to 101 meters squared. That's 88 meters squared more just by adding those 2 extra meters length of chain. So this just shows you the small differences that we can make when we're anchoring can have a big impact on that wider seagrass area. And then when Natural England, the Wildlife Trust, or other environmental organisations go out and survey the seabed, they can see that the seagrass is recovering and that boaters are adopting that best practice. Next slide. And now I'm going to pass you to Caitlin or Tim, who are going to go into a bit more details about what the project's been doing more widely around restoration and where we've actually been putting in advanced mooring systems and doing this restoration work.
Thanks, Kate. I think I'm going to start off and then other Kate is going to take over. So obviously, you know, when you've got an endangered habitat like we have, a threatened habitat like we have, there's 2 things you need to do. One is to protect what you've got, and the other is to try and restore missing, absent or damaged seagrass. And so that nationally, worldwide, there is a move towards attempting seagrass restoration. In the Solent is no exception. In fact, it's one of the sort of areas where seagrass restoration is really being trialled with some intent. As part of the Remedies project, it's the Ocean Conservation Trust that are doing the active restoration component, but Project Seagrass, ourselves at Hampshire Isle Wildlife Trust, are also engaged in very much these same activities. So at the moment, our restoration is largely based around trying to collect wild seed, which is what you can see happening here. These divers are collecting the flowering spathes I mentioned earlier. Once they're developing seeds and they're going into these nylon bags, and that really is the main source of material that we have to attempt our restoration. Next slide, please. The seed, once it's collected, actually has to be sort of matured, if you like. It's called rotted out. As the spathes, rot, the seeds sort of finish their development and then they can be collected. And what do we do with them then? Well, this is the Hessian bag, the seed bomb or seed pod approach. You can see some sediment here being put into a Hessian bag with a little injection of seed put on top of it. And then, there we are, nice video of that actually happening. There's the sediment mix going into a bag, and then a tiny little spoon to pick up some of that collected and matured seed, about 30 seed per bag. In they go, tied up with a piece of string. And then dropped down from a boat onto the seabed, which is what you can see here. It's a great activity to volunteers to get involved in. And top right, you can see we even had Countryfile come along on an incredibly wet day and film a deployment in the Solent near Bewley. Next slide. And that method is part of a suite of methods that are being tried here again at Ocean Conservation Trust in their aquarium there. They're based at the National Marine Aquarium in Plymouth. They're growing seed on top of square mats of coir, coconut byproduct, germinating the seeds in the lab and growing plants, if you like, in blocks, which can then be placed out in the seabed and spaced so that they will hopefully grow together and form a meadow. And far right is one of the more recent developments, which we're also using here in the Solent. And this is what we call dispenser injection seeding. You take yourself a traditional builder's caulking gun and you modify it so that you can inject a mayonnaise mixture of sand and sediment and seeds directly into the seabed. And most recently that has been done again by Ocean Conservation Trust in the Solent, and this year we'll be monitoring the results of those deployments. So next slide, please. So as a Solent person, I'll give you a little summary of what's been going on in the Solent Maritime region as part of the Remedies project. So we have restoration at the mouth of the Beaulieu River, and then some advanced mooring systems, 2 Sterling visitor moorings installed in Cowes Harbour and 4 at Yarmouth Harbour, 2 absolutely popular destinations for boaters in the region. And then you can see over just to the east of Cowes, the voluntary no anchor zone, which has been installed at Osborne Bay. These 8 clearly marked yellow buoys, asking very politely if people could just moor beyond them, seaward of that line, and therefore protect the seagrass meadow. I'm going to hand over to Kate now, I think, who's going to talk about some of the other regions.
Thanks, Tim. Yeah, and the voluntary anchor zone is actually it's only recently gone in, so we're doing some engagement and feedback around that at the moment. So please do get in touch if there's any questions or any feedback. You can contact us through the website form on the Remedies website. So in terms of the other sites, this is showing a bit about the Plymouth Sound and Estuaries special area of conservation. So you can see all of the patches of seagrass around there. The restoration site in Plymouth is around Jenny Cliff Bay. So there's a voluntary no anchor zone in that Kate mentioned earlier. And this one is specifically for that restoration zone. And that is because it's quite a popular area with kind of recreational activity. And so whilst a lot of effort is going into kind of restoring the seagrass bed, they wanted to make sure that all of those efforts, particularly where they put in those pillows that could quite easily be disturbed and removed, are quite heavily protected by management on the surface as well. So there's 6 markers in around Jenny Cliff Bay, and those have actually been in for a few years now as well. Those were installed on the helical kind of screw anchors, and I believe they are Sterling moorings as well. At Corsand Bay, there's quite a few Sterling systems. So there's 17 advanced mooring systems at Corsand Bay. And these have been in for, I believe, about 5 years now. So they actually went in, some of them went in before the Remedies project and some of them as part of the Remedies project. And there's been quite heavily monitoring taking place at these advanced mooring systems. So they've done a lot of dive surveys. They set up a method for doing seagrass surveys specifically in the area around the moorings. And what they've seen is that since those moorings have gone in on the advanced systems, there's been a 212% increase in seagrass, which is a really exciting and almost staggering statistic, and definitely kind of is that proof in the pudding. And hopefully we'll continue to see more of that going forward with the more recent advanced mooring systems. The other site where we've got some advanced mooring systems in is the Fallon Helford Special Area of Conservation. So there's also a voluntary no anchor zone in here. That's around at Flushing Beach. And they also have one down at Durgan in the Helford River. They use a Mylar mooring system, so this is a slightly different one, which I believe you can see in the top right-hand corner of this slide here, which is one kind of subsurface buoy to hold up the bottom of that chain, and kind of does the same thing, making sure that it doesn't create that scour or abrasion impact in the low tide. Again, you can also see all the patches of seagrass there. So some quite sparse, like the one in Falmouth Bay, some quite dense. And so there's been lots of different work going on with like the harbour authorities and different sailing clubs down in Fallon Helford as well, and lots of really good engagement. So just to kind of finish up some of the project activities, looking at the awareness and engagement. So this has been a really big part of this project, is what we found is one of the key barriers is the kind of lack of awareness of where seagrass is, and knowing those systems like the map that Kate showed, or having panels in place that can help fill in that gap and provide that knowledge on where the seagrass bed is and why it's an important habitat. So we've done a lot of educational outreach. So those been included education sessions directly in local schools, which you can see in the middle there, talking directly with the kids, doing different activities such as making your own advanced mooring system out of kind of old pieces of litter, or looking at advanced mooring systems in kind of water tanks on Lego boats and things, so you can actually see how the systems work in practice. We've done lots of webinars, talks, panel discussions, such as this webinar. We've had kind of these running throughout the winter periods. We've also attended boat shows, such as the Southampton Boat Show, which you can see on either side there in those photos. We did a panel at the Southampton Boat Show last year. You can see myself, Kate and Tim on those fancy white leather couches there. Which was a great panel discussion. Got to share a lot about the different projects and seagrass and kind of similar information to this. We also had the stand where you could play different weird games. So how quickly can you plant up a pillow of seagrass seeds, or how quickly can you put together an advanced mooring system? So those kind of things have been really, really key to this project. There's also been citizen science and volunteering. One thing that we try to share as much about as possible is the Project Seagrass Spotter app. So the lack of awareness of where seagrass is partially because we don't have it all mapped, and we don't actually know where all the seagrass is. New things are popping up. We get a lot of kind of anecdotal evidence and feedback on seagrass locations that we're unaware of. And that Seagrass Spotter app is a way of kind of quantifying that. So it's something you can download and have on your phone. And if you see seagrass out and about anywhere, you can snap a photo and upload it straight to that app. And it kind of fills in this map that anyone can access online, that shows us where some of that seagrass is that isn't fully mapped on the kind of magic map professional setting, so that people can fill in that evidence gap, which is a really great way of involving volunteers and citizens. We also do different dive surveys of seagrass with project partners. So Sea Search get involved a lot through the Marine Conservation Society. And I've done a lot of different seagrass surveys, or helping with the actual restoration efforts. There's been lots of volunteer help, as Tim mentioned, with the seed collection and packing up of those Hessian sacks for planting. Every year we have recreational activity surveys ongoing at the sites. In the Solent, those take place at 5 sites. And all of these are coordinated through the Hampshire and Isle of Wight Wildlife Trust, but it's really on the backs of volunteers who've made such a great effort in getting out and collecting all of that data. And those are the types of things that provide us with the evidence for where it needs different management measures, such as the voluntary knowing zone in Osborne Bay. And finally, with different volunteers joining us at events, at those boat shows, or those kind of things, and getting involved that way. So I think that's all of the slides we have. I think we can open it up to any questions. But yeah, thank you so much.
Got a few questions coming through. Just while we're waiting for a few of you to have a little think of any questions that you might like to ask, just on the screen here we've got a QR code, which is a survey of what you've learned in the webinar this evening and what your intent might be going forwards as a boat user in terms of adopting some of the best practice that we mentioned. And this survey goes towards contributing awareness to the project of what the boating community would like to do in terms of protecting our seabed habitats. So please do use the QR code. I will also pop a link into that survey in the chat as well, so you can access it that way. Okay. So one of the questions coming through here. So Tim, this might be one for you. So as sea levels rise with global warming, presumably salinity will drop. How will this affect seagrass?
Well, I mean, I think there's a lot of issues surrounding global warming, sea level rise, temperature. You know, is a critical one. We know already that temperature affects plants. Salinity is an interesting one. Obviously, our salinity derives from the land, and it's slightly, and sea level rise is largely, but not exclusively, to do with fresh water inputs, because there's also thermal expansion. So as the oceans warm up, they expand. So I'm not sure that the salinity aspect is absolutely one of the more critical ones. I think the temperature certainly. Certainly in the English Channel over the last few summers, we've been running really warm. Where I am in Gosport, we've been running 2 degrees warmer than the 10-year average maximum during the summer. And that, for marine animals, is a lot. And then coastal squeeze as well is very significant. You know, where I am again in the Solent, large population structure, there's already a lot of hard coastal defences, sea walls and the like, and they're being built up in response already to sea level rise and population. You know, so there are a few places where we can just let the sea invade the land. Although obviously being the sea, it's got its own things to say about that, and we see some unintentional invasions for certain. But a lot of our coastal habitats, salt marsh as well, and even intertidal mudflats and sandflats, which are important habitats in their own right, they are threatened by coastal squeeze.
Thanks, Tim. So another question here: how much do the advanced mooring systems cost to use? So this might be one split between Caitlin and myself. So the ones in Studland Bay, I believe, are £10 to moor to, and they've got 2 different types there. They've got moorings for 5-ton vessels, or up to 5 ton, and moorings up to 10 ton. And of course, this is new, and it's looking sad, and it may be that moorings will accommodate larger vessels going forwards, but they put £10 on there to moor to it for the day, and then that money goes back into maintaining those mooring systems, which is great. In terms of other sites, in terms of harbours, it will be probably normal visitor mooring costs that they will put on those. So it will vary from site to site, and the ones in Studland, for sure, if you go up to them, there'll be a QR code on the buoys, and that's when you can go onto a booking system and find out more information about that. Caitlin, do you have any more information?
Yeah, only that where we've worked with harbours to get the advanced mooring systems in place, they kind of go in with the traditional moorings that are already there. For example, in Yarmouth, it's on trot moorings. So there's 4 in a line of about, I think it's 10 to 15. 4 of those are advanced mooring systems, so they're the exact same costing for all of the visitor moorings, no matter whether AMS or traditional.
Okay, next question. Are the advanced mooring systems installed for visitors, or are they private? So it's a mixture, it can be both, and it's totally dependent. If a private owner of a mooring wants to invest and install one, then they can. Otherwise, it can be a visitor mooring. So the ones down in Corsan Bay in Plymouth that we mentioned earlier, they are actually private moorings. So if you go there, you won't be able to moor onto those as visitors. The ones in Studland are visitors. The ones in Yarmouth and Cowes are visitor moorings as well, but it's totally dependent. This is a technology that can be used for those who own their own private moorings, or those who are wanting to put them out for visitors. Caitlin, did you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, only that we also use them as markers. But yeah, it's entirely dependent on who's kind of worked with us for those advanced farming systems. Mostly in the Solent, we've worked with harbour authorities, so they're not privately owned, they're for visitors.
Okay, someone's got their hand up. I think it's Ian. I'm just going to have a look to see if I can allow your mic, because I believe that's maybe why. Ian, if you wanted to unmute yourself, if you wanted to ask a question.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Oh, great. Thanks for that. Really fascinating presentation, and horrified at how much damage I'm causing when I'm anchoring. So quick question is, someone mentioned about 5 meter contour. So is that implying that seagrass doesn't grow below 5 meters? Is that correct?
No, so that was me earlier. So that was just a rule of thumb, essentially. Seagrass in the Isles of Scilly can grow up to 10 meters depth, and it can grow beyond the 5 meter contour line. But as a rule of thumb, what we're finding within the other sites, apart from the Isles of Scilly, is that most of the seagrass is contained within the 5 meter contour. By looking at the charts and the maps and the links that we're putting in, to the chat, that's going to give you a more accurate idea of how far they are out from the shoreline. And when we start working with the chart providers and making sure seagrass layers can be added to your charts, or your electronic ones, you'll be able to mark your anchorage points more accurately. But in the meantime, to help you, if you can't access anything online, or that's something that's a bit more difficult for you, then the kind of rule of thumb is anchor outside the 5 meter, but that doesn't mean to say that there won't be seagrass there as well. So if the water clarity is good enough and you can see, then try and avoid anchoring in any vegetation. Certainly out in the Isles of Scilly, you can see through the water, especially on a nice sunny day, where the vegetation is. So when I was out there, it's making sure deploying the anchor outside and then thinking about where the chain is going to move. So if you know that the wind conditions are going to change and the tide, will that chain start to move around into that seagrass, regardless of the fact that your anchor might be outside? So it's just having a little thought about that. And also, if you're stopping for lunch and the tide starts to drop, pulling in some of that chain as well. If we're on an overnight stop, obviously you can't be getting up through the night and changing your chain length, but you have to put it in at the highest mark to keep your boat safe. But certainly in the day, trying to make those adjustments where you can is important. Okay, any more questions, or are we there? So what you can see on the slide here is the website address, and you can also follow the project on social media, and all the project partners are putting lots of stuff out in our media communications and on social media, so you can follow more up to date with what's going on and offer your support. If you want to volunteer and get involved in any of those citizen science opportunities, then go to the website. There's a whole volunteering section, and you'll be appointed to partners depending on what kind of volunteering you would like to do. I hope you've enjoyed this evening and listening to our speakers. I'd like to say a massive thank you to Tim and Caitlin for joining the RWA and the Green Blue on this webinar this evening. And this has been on behalf of the Remedies Project. So as a sustainable boating community, go out there, do the best you can to help protect our environment. Thank you.